Okay, everyone, welcome to the Wednesday, July 5th occurrence of Ambient Weekly Contributors Meeting. And the first topic is from Keith. Keith, are you on? Oh, he actually has not joined yet. Cal or Jackie, can one of you ping Keith?
Yeah, ping.
Yeah, we'll ping now.
And so meanwhile, does anyone else have any topics? Okay, that sounds like a no, so we'll just wait for Keith to come here.
He's online. I think he's joining now.
Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, Keith, so the only topic is from you.
Yeah, so sorry, I completely lost track of time. I was doing something else. Yeah, so as an action item from the last meeting, I went through the Ambient API stock and pulled out some topics for conversation. The first one, well, I'll start with the second one first, because we talked about last week. So we looked, I mentioned last week the destination rule improvement stock, and talked about what we needed to, or asked questions about what we needed to get the closure for the ambient beta. And we realized that the destination rule improvement stock is too general. So I went through and pulled out specific ambient specific questions from the doc. And I put them in the Ambient APIs document. So I'll go to the section. Yeah, it should link directly to it. So as far as the open questions for destination rule, there are 3 top-level questions. 1, should ambient mesh support non-service defined subsets? In other words, should ambient mesh support destination rule defined subsets? Second question, should ztunnel implement any of the destination rule functionality, period? Specifically around like L4 connection settings, for example. And then third question, which destination rule fields would be supported in ambient generally versus beta? And I kind of put my gut feeling for all the fields there in the bullet points. So yeah, does anybody have questions for on any of you, or sorry, does anybody have any thoughts or comments on any of these questions? Because I think that, or I don't think, these are all the things kind of standing in the way of destination rule in the ambient beta.
I had a question. So
Yeah.
most of those are L7 properties. When you say ambient, do you mean ztunnel L4 or waypoint L7? Which one? Are you on? Is it? Are you thinking about ambient APIs for ztunnel or ambient APIs for waypoint?
So that kind of plays into question 2 a little bit. So there are, I believe, based on my memory, so things like TLS, for example, that could be implemented in ztunnel. You've got L4. I believe there's like a L4 outlier detection for connections dropped and things like that. Do we want to require users to deploy a waypoint for those? Do we want to implement some of that in ztunnel? Am I completely off base about how that's implemented? Just wanted to get clarity on those, and that's kind of the purpose of question 2.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, connection pooling at L4 is not really doing much, as far as I understand it, and similar outlier detection at L4 is also not doing much. I mean, you don't have application level errors. So, I mean, most of those are not the same in principle. So even if you have the same field, the values will be much more restricted.
Got it. Okay. So we're saying that the usefulness of some of these fields isn't what it is isn't what it is in sidecar-based Istio.
Right. I mean, load say load balancing. I mean, I don't know what options you have there. Is like only one value, which is, I mean, L4 on load balancing, just like what TCP does.
Sorry, when we say ambient, are we talking about waypoints or Z tunnel?
I just had the same question answer.
Because if it's Z tunnel, the answer is established already, no destination rule. And if it's waypoint, then it's not L4, right? So.
Okay, so that was what I wasn't clear on. So we're saying for Z tunnel, no destination rule period.
Yeah, Z tunnel's intent is to only support the authorization API.
Okay, that's really good to know. So that means.
So is it fair to say, just just making sure we're on the same page. Is it fair to say the layer 4 routing, if we end up implemented one day, it doesn't need destination rule, or there is no plan to implement any of the layer 4 base routing?
So far, the agreed plan has been that Z tunnel is not going to implement the Istio APIs beyond the Istio authorization API. And that's the whole point of Z tunnel, is that it doesn't do these things, right?
Okay, so there are plans to implement the layer 3, layer 4 base routing, but it's with the Kubernetes gateway API.
Oh, no, sorry. No APIs, just
Okay.
core Kubernetes service. Everything
Okay.
else, if you want any features other than TLS and authorization policy, then you use the waypoint.
Okay, yeah, I got confused. The reason I ask this clarification question is when we write the ambient announcement blog, we put out the functions, the 2 slices of the layer between layer 4 and layer 7, right? And we had in the layer 4 one, I think we had some routing functionality in there.
Yes,
That's why I wanted to clarify.
I mean, it's confusing to say routing because it can mean do the standard routing of like how the service works, or it could mean to do augmented, customized routing. The latter is what we're not doing.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, that's helpful. So that completely clears up the second piece. So then that narrows down the third question and the first question. So which destination rule field to be supported in, and I can be more specific here, I'll say in the waypoint generally versus in beta. And then for the first question, should the waypoint support non-service defined subsets?
It's already supported, right? Like the subsets, the existing destination rule is already supported in waypoint, to my understanding.
I wasn't aware of that. The original doc that the destination rule improvements acted as if it was an open question. Maybe if it already works in that.
Because the reason I'm saying is because of our Get Started guide, we use both the classical API and also the new API, the gateway API, and it has usage on destination rule to do either canary-based routing or fault injection.
Okay, so sounds like the answer to this is yes, already implemented slash supported. Okay, that's good to know because the other doc had me thinking otherwise. And then as far as these other, is that only the third question? As far as these other fields, load balancer, attention pool, port level settings, you don't have to get all of these figured out on this call necessarily, but I think it would be good to kind of give a sense of what we need to implement for waypoints now versus later. Yeah. Any opinions there? Okay, well, if not, the doc is out there. This is in the Ambient API doc. It's linked in the Ambient working group meeting notes. So take a look. Let me know if you have opinions. If there's no strong opinions, then I'll just kind of move forward with what I've got here, kind of from a lazy consensus perspective. All right. Thanks. That's it for this bullet point. There's one more one more open question that I linked in the agenda, also in the API stock, and it's around the authorization policy protocol, proposed protocol field. So under the authorization policy heading, it was proposed to add a new protocol field, the unspecified TCP or TCP. And this would be in addition to the target ref field that we'd be adding as a Gateway API kind of compliant policy attachment. John and I both were unsure of whether or not this is fully agreed upon, and if this is greenlit to be implemented. Does anybody have more recollection of what we just agreed upon here? Okay, do we know who might know what was agreed upon, or does anybody here have strong opinions on adding protocol to destination rule?
Can I step
This
back?
is for authorization policy, not destination rule.
Sorry, authorization policy.
Yeah. What's the reason to add a protocol? I forgot.
I believe it would be to. I cut John. I cut John up. I saw him go off mute. But I believe it was to be essentially a heuristic for the control plane to know whether or not a particular authorization policy is intended for L4 versus L7, so the user can more clearly express their intent. I don't know if there may be other reasons behind that, but that's what I remember.
Can I ask a bit like a more general question? Why is sniffing an L7 function? I mean, you sniff at L4, not L7. So should we just move it to a Z tunnel and make sure that the API doesn't force sniffing to happen at waypoint? Like, what's the point of having waypoint that sniffs L4 and does nothing?
I'm not sure I understand. What's the benefit of moving it to Z tunnel? I mean, why does it matter where it's done, really?
Because it's error prone. I mean, if you have a situation where you deploy a waypoint and it sniffs TCP, it seems like it's just not doing anything, and it creates.
What is it? I mean,
condition.
Z tunnel. Why does moving it fix things? The Z tunnel still going to send TCP traffic to the waypoint.
I'm fine not moving it. It's just I'm not questioning whether sniffing is a good thing to have in waypoint in general, because waypoint is HTTP. So having TCP there, and it creates all sorts of weird conditions where things don't apply.
Waypoint's not just HTTP though. It's also HTTP. It still has to handle TCP.
Right, but it does nothing. It just has a latency.
It does not do nothing. That's if it did nothing, then I would agree we could not send TCP there. It does all of the ES2 APIs that we support. You can do TCP routes. You can do telemetry policies. You can do WASM, I believe, maybe not.
No,
Envoy
no
filter.
WASM.
There's all sorts of
Right.
TCP things you can do, right? That we're not going to do in
No.
Z tunnel.
Well, there is stuff you can do with TCP that you can do in Istio. The question is that the good stuff to do in waypoints? And I mean, if you deploy a waypoint, you assume it is GP. Like it's just creates a weird condition that now you don't have to specify just waypoint, you have to specify protocol everywhere.
You should not assume that it's HTTP by deploying a waypoint. A waypoint does not mean HTTP. That's
So can I ask a dumb question? If we do sandwich, would waypoint just handle HTTP? Because honestly, if I think from a user's perspective, I would hate to specify the protocol. I think it's not intuitive and it's easily forgotten, especially when they transform their Istio experience from layer 4 to layer 7. Now they have to remember to change the protocol.
this also applies to sidecars, by the way. Francis, by the way, you're showing some weird page that you're probably not intending to show.
Yeah, but wait, the in sidecar, do I have to specify the protocol? Maybe I missed it.
No, you don't, but it leads to
example,
issues
right.
like where you say, I want to deny all traffic that's post requests, and all of a sudden all TCP traffic is blocked, right? We talked about this quite a bit a few months ago.
Oh, I remember now. Okay, so yeah, the behavior is a little bit unpredictable with sidecar when you don't specify protocol.
Well, it's just not clear what value add you can do waypoint except adding latency, because a lot of the TCP stuff that waypoint does is pretty nominal. Telemetry is nominal. You have the exact same telemetry in zTunnel. Like I want to hear a use case for having an L4 waypoint that's actually useful instead of doing it in zTunnel. I know we do a lot of stuff, but it was never sort of because we had to do it, right? Not because it was never opt-in. Now it's opt-in, so we should probably consider.
So if I'm using a CNI, I probably, like a Cilium, I probably don't need layer 4 authorization policy from Ambient. Is that fair to say?
No, I wouldn't say that. Their policy is not based on TLS, which is what the main value add of zTunnel is.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of zTunnel was from the beginning was just as the thing that's as dumb as possible to get data to the waypoints with encryption. That's basically it. So the idea we had at the time was that the biggest struggle we would have in the project is keeping features out of zTunnel. We did not want anything other than that, right? And it's continued to have features creep, and there's continued push for more and more feature creep from various folks. The goal was always to get traffic to the waypoint and then do everything we need to do there.
So I think quite that kind of answers your question, right? That's the user case, right? If people want layer 4 policy that's mutual TLS based, zTunnel is a good place to config.
Yeah, I know that, but like, I just want to hear what's the waypoint use case for L4. Like, what do we need to do that we need this dedicated TCP proxy?
Almost every API in Istio has L4 functionality that we don't want to put in zTunnel. So there's TCP route, there's destination rule, there's Envoy filter, which exposes all sorts of Envoy stuff that I don't even know about, but that users use. Telemetry is much limited in zTunnel, right? We don't have all the filtering, we don't have the per workload overrides, all that sort of thing. There's all these aspects. Like, we specifically don't want to make zTunnel client aware and be adding these things like, for this client, we route this way, and for this other one, we route this way.
So I know that there's a whole generic thing to it. I mean, there's no WASM in TCP. There's very few filters in Envoy with TCP. I don't think it's that many. I haven't actually seen any used except proxy protocol, which is not even TCP. telemetry is identical in ztunnel and Envoy. I mean, you made it identical, so there's no extra additional stuff.
The backends aren't identical. We only support Prometheus and ctunnel.
Well, it's a questionable. You wanted to support other things anyways. So, and if you have one and then have the problem of double telemetry, so you're just creating a new problem now, right? If anyone, if we should start from the use case and then work backwards, not just assume that Istio did it, so we need to do it. That's sort of my goal here. And I want to understand if any TCP level policy in Waypoint needs to have a good rationale. Otherwise, it's just very expensive to deploy a whole proxy to do TCP stuff.
I think Ben like had a really good question in the chat here. Is ztunnel fundamentally a L4 proxy or a TCP proxy? Because I think that should impact how we, well, if we add enum, what those values are going to be.
Yeah, I think my main objection is just mapping stuff to ztunnel based on protocol versus layer. Like that seems like something that we shouldn't actually care about at the ztunnel layer. And if we need to, ztunnel shouldn't care about protocols ideally, other than the protocols at the layer it's designed to focus on. So yeah, I don't really want to get into a situation where saying, well, this is TCP, so it needs to go to ztunnel. This is something else, it needs to go. Like that whole thing, that seems backwards versus just saying this policy is designed to apply to layer 3, layer 4, layer 7, whatever. And that's the way it's steered.
I think in most usage in Istio, L4 and TCP and L7 and HTTP are basically used interchangeably, which maybe we shouldn't do. And this is an API, so the phrasing actually matters quite a bit. But I'm not sure that that's a distinction that's often made. And I agree with Quad. It's actually should be L3 and L4, which makes it a bit even wonkier.
That's fair. Yeah.
It makes TCP actually a much worse term here, right? Because we do want to support non-TCP.
We basically already do with the DNS proxy stuff. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking. Fair enough. Yeah. Either way, like I would prefer not to conflate protocol with the layer, since the layer is what we're using to like distinguish what should be responsible for what.
Well, I agree. I mean, but it's already L4 proxy, right? It's written as an L4 proxy. So L3 will be just an additional feature now. In the future, it should be L3 and L4, but I don't think we're going to take away L4 when L3 is added.
You mean you're saying that the ztunnel is now, whether we like it or not, layer 3 and layer 4, so we would have to account for both?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise you have to implement connection tracking and all that stuff. And
Yeah. I think that's fine. Like, it's just more, I want to say, like, if we say that this policy applies to layer 3 or layer 4, and therefore it goes to ztunnel, I'd rather say that than say this is TCP. So our convention is that TCP traffic rules apply to ztunnel. Like, that's not a useful API surface, but construct is kind of what I'm saying. Or at least I think that's a messy one that we maybe shouldn't replicate here unless we have a real good reason to do it.
So do we have an idea about where we're leaning with respect to, should we add a protocol field to our authentication policy? I think it sounds like, yes, we want to, and that's even outside of Ambient, this is something that's desirable. But sounds like most of the discussion at this point is what are the enums going to be?
Well, if the enums are not protocols, then it wouldn't be a protocol field. It would be something else, maybe layer or something, or I don't know, something like that. But essentially that's kind of what I'm saying. Is I would like it to not if I would like to avoid using that to determine whether something should go to. I would like to avoid protocol, as in the strict sense of the term, being used to determine whether something goes through ZTunnel or not. Protocol is not a useful metric to decide whether traffic should go through ZTunnel or not. Layer 3 traffic, layer 4 traffic, that's fine. But protocol really shouldn't be involved in that decision, strictly speaking, as in terms of like actual, OSI layer protocol stuff.
Yeah, +1 for me there. But naming aside, is that generally the consensus here? Yes, we need to add this field. Yes, we want to add this field in addition to target ref, and we need to change the name from protocol and make the enum make the enum based on the enforcement point or layer that we want the policy to occur. Is that the takeaway I'm getting here?
I don't have an objection to adding this, yeah, as long as the naming is clear. Yeah, like if we need that to make a decision, it's fine to add it. Unless someone else has an objection that I'm missing.
I guess I would also suggest to look at our existing authorization policy and some of the semantics there, just to be a little bit consistent and not too surprising.
Yeah, +1. I don't think that this changes any of the semantics. I do think we want to avoid the scenario that John mentioned earlier, where you want to only accept put requests and now all TCP traffic is denied because the layer is different. But outside of that, I do. How about this? I think that this is worth maybe a design doc on its own, since one, it is a couple of API changes, and two, it's on a sensitive part of our API surface. So how about I take the action item to create a design doc for this change. I already have an umbrella issue out for the target ref change to authorization policy, but I think that I won't say protocol, but the layer adding layer context to our authorization policy is worth a separate standalone conversation, just to make sure that we keep the semantics and the upgrade path clear. So I'll take that action item.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Keith. Yeah, one thing I guess I would encourage us to think through is we already have this target ref. We also have a workload selector, right, in the authorization policy. So these are specific to waypoints, to my understanding. So is there anything we can leverage? The fact a user might already have the ref or the workload selector to kind of leverage, so they don't have to specify this, and then only maybe in certain scenario that they need clarity, then they have to specify this.
So I think there are two parts to that conversation, right? When it comes to workload selector, my understanding is that we want to not support that in Ambient. And then digging deeper into some of these new fields, target ref and this new layer field. For target ref, that would be an Ambient specific, an Ambient deployment topology specific field. If you're using sidecars, it would be ignored, is what I'm understanding. And then as far as this layer field, we want that actually in both sidecars and in Ambient. That's my understanding so far. Am I missing something there?
Wow, okay. I didn't realize we're changing this for sidecar also. This layer or protocol. I thought it was only for Ambient.
I mean, based on John's scenario earlier, it sounds like it would at least be useful for sidecars. It sounds like there are some existing gaps, or some existing, I'll say, some bugs or unexpected behavior in sidecar mode with protocol.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I guess that's the question, right? Do we want to quote unquote backport this to sidecars, or push forward with, or just kind of only make this an ambient only type of thing?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about changing it for sidecar, unless it's fully backwards compatible.
It is. I mean, I feel like we're talking about this abstract thing when it's all kind of written here. And maybe it would help to review the doc offline and discuss
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That sounds good. So sounds like just relying on the target ref wouldn't helpful. You still need this layer of protocol thing. The fact you have a target ref doesn't help you in the authorization policy.
I mean, so the target ref piece is something that's consistent with every Istio API that has a workload selector. That's kind of a bigger change. The authorization policy just has this extra protocol piece that we know we want to apply for ambient. But like, for example, I think maybe request authentication also has a workload selector that would be replaced with the target ref as well for ambient. And so it's still helpful in the sense that we don't want to use workload selector in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got that. Okay, Keith, I think your action item makes sense.
Okay, cool. And I'll take another action item to create GitHub issues for all of the resources that need target refs as well. I guess another follow-up question, is this Ambient APIs doc considered like approved or blessed by TOC, or is there some other API review necessary from TOC in order to like add a field to like request authentication?
Okay, so next Monday, there's a TOC meeting. I think it would be good to kind of maybe Keith, you can talk some of the changes there. It would be good to kind of socialize with a few other TOC members not being here because they will be reviewed the API doc. I assume this would land in the API repository, right?
Right. Okay. I can do that.
Okay, perfect. And what other changes do you envision for the target ref besides authorization policy?
Off the top of my head, any resource that is applicable to ambient, so like excluding sidecar, for example, but any resource applicable to ambient that uses workload selector for policy should also have, or should instead be programmed via a target ref instead of workload selector. And I mean, this ambient APIs doc says pretty much the same thing. When it lists several, request authentication is one that would have no other changes. Peer authentication, peer authentication is irrelevant. Telemetry API, for example, WASM plugin, proxy config. Those are.
Okay. Yeah. I remember notes now. Sorry. That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to get something. Might be a one pager, but just extracting a lot of the context from the stock for the TOC meeting next week.
That's great. Thank you so much, Keith. And I saw on the chat, Jackie was asking about the drive ambient to beta. Did you say, Keith, there's going to be a subgroup set up for that?
Yes. So in last meeting, we kind of discussed some slipping priorities and Francis had the idea to create some stakeholders to iterate on the beta scope. Coincidentally, you're on that list, Lynn. But it's John, you, myself, and then Nathan Mittler volunteered from Aviatrix to kind of get together a core scope for ambient beta because the concern was that that there's some must-haves from a priority perspective. Like we're not going to have a beta quality ambient ready without the things being done, and they didn't have any owners on them. So we thought it would be helpful to have a defined scope for what that minimum viable product is, and then use that to kind of filter our priority or order of operations when it comes to executing.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
there was
definitely pull me in.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just saying that definitely involve me. Yeah, sorry, I cut you through.
Yeah, no, but yeah. The other thing I forgot to mention that there was a timeline associated with that, and to have a proposed scope ready by like 7/21 and organize a one-off TOC meeting to kind of get sign off of that scope.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Sounds great. Do we have other topic case on this document or anything else?
That was it on my end. I think Francis now stepped away, but I think, yeah, I had the only topic, so I think we're pretty much done.
Yeah, I'm still here. Just wondering if anyone else have any topics.
Okay, so Francis, next Wednesday I will be flying. So just if you schedule any meeting, just avoid next Wednesday.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Should we call it a wrap?
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, folks. Talk to you later.